Welcome to What the Paper Said, in which I, Patrick Crozier, skim through the Times from 100 years ago, read some of the articles and comment on the ones I find interesting. In this episode, the week ending the 29th of March 1925, popularism is unpopular amongst some, and voyeurism is unpopular for pretty much everyone. But first, some of the other items that have caught my attention this week. A strike has begun and ended in the bookbinding industry. Parliament approved the building of the Singapore naval base. Intended to deter a Japanese attack on British interests in the Indian Ocean, it will fail to do so and be captured in 1942 in the biggest military defeat in British history. General Henry Rawlinson, Lord Rawlinson, has died in India. Rawlinson was the commander for the battles of the Somme and of Amiens. The Somme was expensive and largely unsuccessful, at least in terms of taking ground. Amiens, on the other hand, was an unqualified success, heralding the collapse of the German army in 1918. If you've never heard of it, that is because it doesn't fit the narrative. Rawlinson died from appendicitis, as did German President Friedrich Ebert a few weeks ago. There has been a lot of debate in recent weeks over something called the Geneva Protocol. The well-informed amongst you will have heard of a Geneva Protocol, passed in 1925, which dealt with chemical warfare. This isn't it. This Geneva Protocol obliges members of the League of Nations to come to the aid of any member who is attacked. The British government has rejected it for reasons I don't entirely understand. A demonstration of television, presumably John Logie Baird's television, has taken place at Selfridges in London. An attempt is being made to set up a European consortium to take on the Americans at filmmaking. I think we can assume it wasn't a great success. The Post Office, it was in charge of such things in those days, has announced that a design by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott has been chosen for future phone boxes. For younger listeners, these are the familiar red booths installed up and down the country that back in the day, if you were lucky, would house a telephone that didn't work. It's a family show, so I won't say what would happen if you were unlucky. A commission set up to look at the question of the death penalty in the military has decided that it should be retained. It won't be. Its abolition will take place sometime before the Second World War. In a speech, Stalin has admitted that the chances of exporting the communist revolution to the rest of Europe are remote. In the German presidential election, it has been suggested that Field Marshal Hindenburg will enter the contest in the second round. Also this week, Hitler has been banned from speaking. The stated reason is that in previous speeches he made statements that might provoke hearers to excesses. Something tells me that is not going to be entirely successful. A new law passed in Tennessee bans the teaching of evolution in the state's schools. Spoiler alert, this will not be the last we hear of this. Swedish Match posted very good results for the year. It is a rare thing for a Swedish company to make the pages of the Times, and a sad thing. Under the tutelage of one Ivar Kruger, Swedish Match is a massive fraud and will go bust spectacularly in the early 1930s. Introduced as a wartime measure, there are moves to make summertime permanent. The idea of a national time, as opposed to a local time, and therefore something that could be set by the state, only came about because of railways and the need to stick to timetables. Here's a question. What was the population of Tel Aviv in 1910? Take as long as you like, after you've hit the pause button. The answer is 550. Nowadays, it is 1,000 times that. One reason for that might be the attitude of the Arabs, which was described in the Times this week as one of sulky obstruction. Good to see they've sorted that one out. I also learnt this week that a husband is responsible for his wife's wrongs, or, as one correspondent to the Times put it, legally speaking, a wife has the status of a pet monkey. Here's another question. How many buses were licensed by the Metropolitan Police to ply for trade on London's streets? If you got 5,474, award yourself 1 point. By the way, 4,269 of those buses are owned by the London General Omnibus Company. That's Lord Ashfield's lot. At Leeds Assizes, as they called Crown Courts in those days, a James Doyle of Doncaster was on trial for the murder of an Alfred Needham. The prosecutor, Sir Herbert Neild, KC, outlined the facts of the case. It was very remarkable that in that district there were a number of persons with prurient minds who made a practice of going to the cricket fields to keep observation on couples known to resort there. Needham and a friend named Wilfrid Thrussell were in the habit of doing this. About 10:30 on the night of December the 16th, the prisoner and his fiancée, Doris Wilford, went to the cricket field, and the prisoner, seeing two forms over the wall, said, "What is the game?" and thereupon drew a knife and struck 2 blows at Needham. The wound was very severe, and Needham staggered away. Dead, as it happens, the jury recorded a verdict of not guilty. Elections are currently underway in London for the numerous boards of guardians responsible for administering the Poor Law. The fight everywhere is being waged against Poplarism, and the London Municipal Society, which is appealing to voters to take more interest in these elections, quotes Islington as an example of the economies which can be effected under municipal reform administration. That may be the last time Islington has ever been cited as an example of cost-effectiveness. Poplarism takes its name from the activities of the Labour-dominated Poplar Board of Guardians, more on which later. The Municipal Reform Party is the main opposition to Labour. The Conservatives are not fielding any candidates in this election, and the Liberals very few. For the 3 years 1919 to 22, the Labour Party had a majority on the Islington Board of Guardians, and expenditure was £1,411,575. In the following 3 years, the municipal reformers had a majority, and the expenditure was £912,619, representing an annual average saving equal to a rate of 1 shilling 9 pence in the pound. I am shocked to hear that the Labour Party is profligate. You could, I suppose, argue that the municipal reformers weren't spending enough, or that some people didn't get the help they needed. The article goes on to list a number of boroughs, and the number of people being helped. The long and short of it is that most boroughs have about 5% of the population in receipt of relief. In Poplar, it is a whopping, so to speak, 17.3%. Now, it is tempting to think this is because they are a bunch of communists, a temptation I am happy to submit to. I have heard it argued that Poplar's problems, being near to the docks, are unique. It is possible. The Poplar, Bow and Bromley Ratepayers Association has forwarded a statement to the Minister of Health, pointing out that since 1919 the administration of local government in Poplar has been almost entirely under the control of the Socialist Party, that the conduct of affairs has been mostly in the interest of one section only of the ratepayers, and that the present rate is 23 shillings in the pound. This is so seriously affecting business in the borough that some firms are removing their business to other areas and are having to reduce their establishments, with consequent lessening of employment. Rates. Before the late 1980s, every property would be given a rateable value, say £10. The council would set a rate. That might be 10 shillings in the pound, which would mean the charge would be £5. If the rate was, as it is here, 23 shillings in the pound, then the charge would be £11 10 shillings. When it comes to whether businesses are actually moving away because of high taxes, we don't know for sure, but I would be surprised if they weren't. Attention is called to the effect of the Representation of the People Act 1918, Section 9, which provides that the receipt of poor relief shall not be a disqualification for voting as a local government elector. I thought only ratepayers could vote in local elections, something that was abolished in Britain in the 1940s and in Northern Ireland in the late 1960s. I suppose it is possible to be both a ratepayer and a recipient of poor law relief. Receipt of poor relief shall not be a disqualification for voting as a local government elector, and the Association declares, the fact that vast numbers in this borough who are the recipients of Guardian's relief are in the position of exercising the franchise and voting at municipal elections places the present extravagant administration in a very strong and formidable position, and having regard to the fact that some 55% of the assessment interests have no opportunity of exercising the vote, makes it practically impossible to bring about any change at council and Guardian's elections. 55% of the assessment interests have no opportunity of exercising the vote. I guess that means that businesses, that is, the people who pay most of the taxes, don't get the vote. I thought they did. And again, I didn't think that changed until the 1940s. But it sounds as if Poplar is now in a vicious circle. Voters feel poor, they vote for handouts, the board puts up rates to pay for the handouts, business leaves, the voters feel poorer. These matters are brought under your observation for the reason that the fullest representation has been made with a view to obtaining redress, but without avail. The distribution of the rates of the borough is entirely in the hands of the extreme socialist element, and much of the money raised is disbursed with a view to maintaining the political interest of that element. The total sum of financial wastage is enormous, and is imposing a terrible burden upon the trade industry of the district, seriously menacing its future as an industrial centre. Communists buying votes. Couldn't happen today. There is the utmost concern and disquiet among the large and responsible ratepayers in the borough at the present condition, and the greatest apprehension as to the future. They therefore approach you in the hope that you will take steps as His Majesty's Government may consider wise to put a stop by legislation to the present unfavourable administration, and ensure that sound and reasonable administration in the interest of all sections of ratepayers in the borough shall ensue. Libertarians from time to time debate the franchise. One section claims that so long as all adults can vote, socialism is inevitable. Others say, no, you have to make the argument. The speed with which the extension of the vote to people who do not bear the immediate costs of high taxes has led to high spending by elected bodies is astonishing. Anyway, that's all for this week. I aim to have something up next week, but I promise nothing.